Thank you for the kind introduction. Before I get into generative AI guardrails, my guardrails on the stage are I have very low latency, so I speak very fast, and sometimes I'm very nervous as well. So with that said, let's get into the generative AI guardrails that I have seen in practice, what we are deploying in practice, and sharing some information from what's on the ground. Of course, as in the introduction, I'm from Encrypt, and I'm following three distinguished speakers, so I don't have to set up the problem. They've done a stellar job at that. What we see in our discovery and also Gartner reports are like many of the CIOs are planning or already in motion a lot of the generative AI initiatives. They're accelerated by their CEOs or CTOs that hey, I need something generative AI. But as my previous speaker and a couple of speakers before that spoke about, like there is a real significant and complex. It's not that the impact of generative AI is not there. It's just very powerful. But at the same time, we have to be aware of any new technology, be cautious and adopt it as we go. So we have seen a lot of these in the news, like leaking sensitive user data, and then the hidden backdoors that were talked about in the previous talks, and chatbots being held liable. The consequences from a business perspective are, of course, like very expensive. Like nowadays, the stock market is quite volatile to news. So we saw that Gemini hallucinated, and Google stock market cap fell by $90 billion, right? And then a lot of the breaches that we are seeing now are also like 60% of them are from internal data breaches. So how can generative AI even stop it? It's only going to accelerate that process. So we have to be cautious there. So with AI, as Richard, one of the earlier speakers, was talking about, we have to look at it from a fresh perspective, right? So there are new challenges coming up. It's not just a firewall is going to solve this for you, or a supply chain framework is going to solve it for you. So of course, I'm just going to talk to you about how we are seeing it on the field. And then, of course, please do share your learnings as well. Would love to talk further. So we are seeing a big need for AI red teaming, where we are surfacing these risks in the first place, even before you put it out for deployment or even putting it out for production. What are the risks involved of me using a model? And then once you are aware of the risk, and if you're a model developer or a fine tuner, then how can you make it safer to use? Okay. And then when it is in runtime, as a previous speaker was also alluding to, having runtime guardrails or even model-based guardrails as well, that helps. And then all these require constant monitoring of all the threats and the usage as well. At the same time, this cannot be generic, because every enterprise has its own use case. So it should be customizable, automated, and continuous. So now moving on to the guardrails, what I mean by LLM guardrails is primarily, you have your set of developers on the left, developer copilots, agents, and enterprises. But what is powering all those applications is these amazing models that have been developed, right? So that guardrails is acting as the interface between these users and these model developers. So that's what I mean by guardrails helping prevent any malicious activity happening. So the way typically we have seen guardrails being implemented, I'll go over what we are seeing as a new trend coming up as well. You have your users, and then they send in a request, and there's a firewall or a layer in between. And once it is deemed safe, it sends to the request, is sent to the model provider, and then the response is sent back and then checked again. So this is a typical way of how a guardrails implementation is taken. I'll go into few other architectures that we are implementing, and we are because there's a need for such architectures. So what should be the aspects that guardrail should typically address, right? So what are the typical problems that guardrail should solve? Revolve around 4 pillars. So one is privacy, security, compliance, and integrity. So of course, as the previous speaker was alluding to as well, and how can we detect and stop PII and sensitive information from being like logged onto these third-party vendors, right? And then from a compliance and moderation perspective, it's more about like, can I keep the conversation on topic to make sure that, I'm not violating any ethical guidelines, and also, ban competitors. So, I know an example of a Chevy chatbot which sold a Tesla for $1, right? So it shouldn't be, the case that it's common occurrence. And believe me, it's very easy to, do all of these. And from a security perspective, it's the most important thing that a security team looks at, right? Like, how can I prevent sensitive information from being leaked into the application or even out of the application as well? And then, of course, the major problem is on prompt injection and jailbreaks that we are seeing actually on the rise because of how easy it is to also red team. We are seeing these attacks also on the rise. So the fourth category, which I'm seeing from a guardrails perspective, is also integrity. Because guardrails is at the level where you have your users and your LLMs, it should also take the responsibility of correcting for any incorrect information sent out or hallucinations as well. So let's look at some of the characteristics. So we just went over, like on the previous slide, we went over the aspects that should be addressed by guardrails. In this slide, we'll go over what are the characteristics that any typical guardrail should have. Because it's a layer between the user and the model, the infra required should be very lightweight to set it up. And because it becomes the single point of failure, it also needs to be very robust when it is implemented. And I just showed you a list of model providers, right? There are now 50 of them. So the customizability has to be, paramount, given very important. And then the applications it supports should also be, extensive as well. Coming to the user experience, right? So accuracy and latency are very important. I don't have to say that. But if something gets typed and you get a response back after 2 seconds, that's not good user experience, right? So guardrail should not be the factor for that particular thing to happen. So those are the typical characteristics that we should keep in mind when we are building guardrails. The guardrails can be of different kinds. It's not necessarily at like the user and at the application level. So it could be, you have safety alignment training during your model training phase. And as previous speaker was alluding to, also the system prompt itself can be a strong one as a guardrail. And then, of course, you can have your own vendor-based guardrails as well. But there are challenges to that. So for alignment-based and system prompt-based, the customizability is very low, right? So and latency is very low. So there's no additional latency because of that. But what happens is the accuracy and how easy it is to red team it is just very high. Trust me, like we have done so many system prompts, like very hard system prompts, but we are able to red team them as well. And then the second category goes into like these, apart from models, right? So it's the LLM based and the NLP based, classical NLP based. So those have like high customizability, and you can get high accuracy with the NLP based models. And the infra requirements, you trade off on the infra requirements for those and the latency requirements. So there's always a trade-off involved. But what happens with the alignment-based and the system prompt-based is it hinders usability for defense. So you're so defensive that at the same time, like you're blocking everything, even useful things you're blocking. So that's why like our trade-off is like LLM-based or NLP-based. Start with system prompt. If it's easy to jailbreak it, or if it doesn't serve your purpose, then move on to LLM or NLP based. So these are some of the major players like AWS Guardrails, Guardrails AI, Nemo Guardrails, and a selfish plug of Encrypt AI Guardrails as well. Try out all of them. I will recommend, I'm not going to say just try ours, because everybody has their own pros and cons. Definitely try out, and if you need to know more, we have a booth downstairs, so please visit us. We can give you a demo of that. What we are seeing as a new requirement from Guardrails is primarily around in the RAG setup. So I just talked to you about the jailbreak attacks that happened at the user and application level, right? But what we are seeing on a rise is primarily at this level as well, because indirect prompt injection attacks can happen from URLs, PDFs, documents, anywhere, and get embedded into vector DBs. Once it is in the vector DB, these guardrails cannot do anything, right? The guardrails which are at the user, between the user and LLM, they cannot do anything. So you have to have a guardrail before anything gets embedded into the vector DB. So you can prevent like sensitive information being leaked into your vector DB in the knowledge base, or even like indirect prompt injections from being circulated as well. So that's seeing as a rise, because it's so easy to conduct these attacks, right? It's so easy to exfiltrate information, as I think Joseph was talking about, right? Like you have malware hidden inside the code. It's already there. You have already downloaded the model. So it's so easy. Once it's there, you can generate toxic content or NSFW content, or even like spread misinformation from off-topic content. So moving on to the benefits of guardrails. Why do I need guardrails, right? We just talked about all the risks, but what do they translate to from like a dollar perspective? Of course, you build a very great generative AI threat detection and response. At the same time, you are blocking malicious attempts. So that means you're, stopping model abuse and saving dollars, because running these LLMs are expensive. So if you have a lighter model, which is less expensive to run, so you save dollars on them. And imagine a company who has built years gaining trust from their users, right? And now with Air Canada and even with some of the legal chatbots that we are seeing, the kind of content that we can elicit out of it can lose the trust of the users very easily. So how can I, keep my brand risk and legal risk at a minimum? So that's the, you can have revenue, but at the same time, earning lost trust is very, challenging. So, of course, I'm sorry, there's some issue on the slide, but Guardrails secures you from all the, majority of the OWASP top 10 LLM vulnerabilities. Of course, this is going to change in like a month. We are going to come up with new top 10 vulnerabilities now. And yeah. So this is about just about the company that I work for. We pioneer in guardrails, red teaming, alignment, and monitoring. So the whole gamut that you require to secure your generative AI applications. So today I talked about guardrails, but if you want to talk about other challenges with generative AI security, we have a booth downstairs. We have an amazing demo setup. Please do visit us. Thank you.